No one saved me a seat at the family dinner. It's just a celebration of success, my sister said. So I ordered pizza, ate alone, and watched myself on national news. The next morning, my phone couldn't stop buzzing. The dining room table was packed when I arrived at Mom's house that Friday evening. Extended leaves had been added to accommodate everyone, and I counted 12 chairs arranged around the polished oak surface. 12 place settings with a good China mama only brought out for special occasions. 12 positions filled with cousins, aunts, uncles, and my immediate family members who'd gathered to celebrate my sister Vanessa's promotion to regional marketing director. Except there wasn't a 13th chair. There wasn't a spot for me anywhere. I stood in the doorway holding the bottle of wine I'd picked up on the way over, scanning the crowded room for an empty space that simply didn't exist. My mother glanced up from serving mashed potatoes and offered me a distracted smile before turning back to my Uncle Richard's outstretched plate. "Hey, where should I sit?" I asked, my voice barely carrying over the chatter of congratulations being heaped on Vanessa at the head of the table. My sister looked up, her newly highlighted hair catching the light from the chandelier. She wore the expression of someone who just remembered they'd forgotten to feed their neighbor's cat while they were on vacation, mild concern mixed with a calculation of whether it was really that big of a deal. "Oh, Lisa," she said, her tone apologetic, but not particularly bothered. "I guess we miscounted. There's more chicken in the kitchen if you want to grab a plate and eat in there. It's just a celebration of success, family thing." Just a family thing. As if I wasn't family. As if the past 32 years of sharing blood and a last name had suddenly been revoked because I didn't have a fancy corporate title to my name. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life. My father was deep in conversation with Vanessa's husband Derek about stock options. My younger brother Cameron scrolled through his phone between bites of dinner roll. Aunt Louise laughed too loudly at something Cousin Madison said. Nobody made eye contact with me. Nobody offered to squeeze in another chair or share their space. The kitchen, it was then. I walked through the swinging door and set my wine bottle on the counter with more force than necessary. The kitchen was empty except for the aftermath of dinner preparation. Bowls of vegetables, serving platters, an array of condiments and side dishes that hadn't made it to the table. I grabbed a plate from the cabinet and stood there looking at the food, suddenly not hungry at all. Through the wall, I could hear Vanessa's voice rising above the others, telling some story about impressing the executive board during her final presentation. Laughter erupted. Someone clinked their glass with a fork, the sound of a toast being made, probably by my father, using the same words he'd used for Cameron's law school graduation last year and Vanessa's wedding 3 years before that. I pulled out my phone and opened the delivery app. A large pepperoni pizza would arrive in 30 minutes. I wasn't eating their leftover celebration food in the kitchen, like some kind of uninvited guest who'd wandered in off the street. The thing nobody at that table knew, the thing I hadn't told anyone in my family because they'd never asked, was that I'd spent the last 18 months working on something that actually mattered. While Vanessa climbed the corporate ladder and Cameron billed hours at his firm, I'd been volunteering 70 hours a week at the downtown women's shelter, developing a job training program for homeless women trying to get back on their feet. It started small. I'd been laid off from my administrative position at a medical supply company 2.5 years ago and needed something to do with my time while I figured out my next move. The shelter needed volunteers, and I needed purpose. What began as serving meals and sorting donations evolved into something bigger when I noticed how many women came through our doors with skills, but no way to market themselves. No recent job history, no professional references. I wrote a grant proposal, then another, then 15 more. I contacted local businesses, begging them to give these women a chance. I created resume workshops, interview prep sessions, and a mentorship program pairing our residents with working professionals in their desired fields. I worked out of a shared office space in the shelter's basement, usually until 2 or 3 in the morning, fueled by vending machine coffee and the kind of determination that comes from feeling invisible everywhere else in your life. 6 months ago, a producer from Channel 7 News reached out. They'd heard about the program through one of our success stories, a woman named Patricia, who'd gone from living in her car to managing a restaurant in 8 months. They wanted to do a feature, then a follow-up piece, then another when 3 more of our women landed full-time positions with benefits in the same week. This morning, I'd gotten a call from a producer at Good Morning America. They wanted me in New York on Monday to discuss the program on a national platform. The segment was already scheduled. They booked my hotel and flights. In less than 3 days, I'd be sitting across from one of the most recognizable news anchors in America, talking about the work that had consumed my life for the past year and a half. But I hadn't mentioned it to my family. What was the point? They'd proven time and time again that if it didn't come with a salary figure they could brag about at their country club, it didn't register as legitimate achievement. When I first told my mother about volunteering at the shelter, she patted my hand and said, "That's nice, honey. Good way to stay busy until you find a real job." The pizza arrived right as dessert was being served in the dining room. I paid the delivery driver, grabbed a Coke from the fridge, and carried my food upstairs to my old bedroom, which Mom had converted into a guest room, but still held most of my childhood furniture. I sat cross-legged on the bed, opened the pizza box on my lap, and turned on the small TV mounted on the wall. The local news was airing an evening replay. I flipped through channels mindlessly while I ate, not really watching anything, just letting the noise fill the silence. The isolation felt heavier than usual tonight. It wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked or dismissed by my family, but something about the literal absence of a chair felt particularly symbolic. Then my own face appeared on the screen. I nearly dropped my pizza slice. Channel 7's evening broadcast was airing a new segment about the shelter program, one I hadn't known they were working on. The reporter stood outside the shelter's main building, explaining how the job training initiative had now placed over 50 women in permanent employment with a 92% retention rate after 6 months. The segment cut to interviews with women I'd worked with. Maria, who'd lost her apartment after her ex-husband destroyed her credit, talking about her new position as an office manager. Jennifer, who'd been living in the shelter with her 2 kids, showing off her customer service workspace at a tech company downtown. Patricia again, this time discussing how she'd been promoted to assistant general manager. Then there I was, filmed during one of our workshop sessions, leaning over a table to help someone with their resume. My voice played over the footage. These women aren't broken. They're not charity cases. They're skilled, capable people who hit rough patches in a system that makes it almost impossible to recover from setbacks. All they needed was someone to believe in them and give them the tools to rebuild. The reporter's voice returned. Lisa Hayes has become something of a local hero to these women and the broader community. Her innovative approach to job training and placement has caught the attention of several national organizations, and we're hearing rumors of big announcements coming soon. The segment ended with a link to the shelter's website and information about how to donate or volunteer. I sat frozen, pizza forgotten, staring at the screen as it moved on to a story about road construction on Highway 40. Downstairs, the dinner party continued. Nobody had called me down for dessert. Nobody had noticed I was gone. The celebration of Vanessa's success carried on without any acknowledgement that I existed, while my face had just been broadcast into thousands of homes across the city. I finished my pizza slowly, methodically processing what had just happened. The timing was almost too perfect to be real. Sitting alone in my childhood bedroom, eating delivery food while the television validated everything I'd poured myself into for the past year and a half. When I finally went back downstairs around 9:00, the dinner party was breaking up. Vanessa was accepting final congratulations at the door. Mom was packing leftovers into containers. Dad was helping Uncle Richard with his coat. "Oh, Lisa," Mom said when she saw me. "I saved you some pie. It's in the fridge." "Thanks," I said. "I'm actually good. I ordered pizza." "Pizza?" Vanessa wrinkled her nose. "Why would you do that when we had all this food?" I could have told them right then. I could have mentioned the news segment, the Good Morning America appearance, the growing recognition of work I actually cared about, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the petty satisfaction of knowing what they didn't. Maybe I was just tired of trying to prove my worth to people who'd already decided I didn't measure up. "Just wanted something different," I said with a shrug. I helped clean up in silence, washing dishes while Vanessa held court in the living room, still basking in the attention. Cameron left early to meet friends at a bar. Dad fell asleep in his recliner. The evening wound down the way family gatherings always did, with too much food consumed and not enough meaningful connection made. I drove home to my small apartment across town around 10:30. My phone sat silent in my cup holder. No text asking where I disappeared to during dinner. No calls checking if I was okay. The message was clear. My presence or absence made no difference to their celebration. But when I walked into my apartment and checked my phone properly, the screen lit up with notifications, dozens of them. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, Facebook messages, emails. They kept coming in waves, making my phone buzz continuously in my hand. Sarah from the shelter. OMG, I just saw you on the news. You looked amazing. Mr. Patterson, one of our volunteer mentors. Lisa, that segment was incredibly powerful. So proud to be part of this program. Numbers I didn't recognize. Is this the woman from the news? I want to volunteer. How can I donate? My company is looking for training programs to support. Can we talk? The shelter's director, Margaret. My phone is exploding. Channel 7's website crashed from traffic to our donation page. Whatever just happened, it's working. More messages kept arriving. Former colleagues from my old job, friends I hadn't spoken to in months, my high school English teacher, a city council member's office asking about scheduling a meeting, 3 different reporters requesting interviews, a venture capitalist interested in discussing funding expansion to other cities. I sat on my couch watching the notifications accumulate, feeling surreal and disconnected from the sudden flood of attention. Hours ago, I couldn't even get a chair at my own family's dinner table. Now, hundreds of people were reaching out, wanting to connect, to help, to be part of something I'd built from nothing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I fell asleep after midnight with my phone still buzzing on the nightstand, messages still arriving in steady streams. Tomorrow would bring more attention, more opportunities, more validation from strangers who understood the value of what I was doing, even if my own family couldn't see it. Saturday morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains and my phone vibrating so aggressively it had moved 3 inches across the nightstand. I grabbed it, squinting at the screen that showed 47 new notifications just from the past hour. The top message was from a New York number. Miss Hayes, this is Deborah Chen from Good Morning America. We've seen the surge in interest about your program after last night's local coverage. We'd like to expand Monday's segment from 5 minutes to a full 15-minute interview and possibly add you to our online series about social entrepreneurs. Please call me ASAP. I sat up fully awake. 15 minutes on national television. That wasn't a quick, feel-good story tucked between cooking segments. That was legitimate coverage. My email inbox had exploded overnight. 3 foundations wanted to discuss grant opportunities. A publisher asked if I'd considered writing a book about developing community support programs. 2 different universities invited me to speak at their social work departments. Someone from the mayor's office requested a meeting about expanding the program citywide with municipal funding. The shelter's donation page, according to Margaret's excited 6 a.m. email, had received over $18,000 since the news segment aired. $18,000. We usually survived on monthly donations of maybe $3,000 or $4,000, scraped together from small individual contributions and the occasional local business sponsorship. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, scrolling through messages and trying to categorize them into some manageable system. The overwhelming response felt both thrilling and terrifying. I'd been working in relative obscurity for so long, content with the small victories of individual women finding jobs, that I hadn't prepared for this kind of spotlight. Around 9, my phone actually rang. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Is this Lisa Hayes? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, speaking. Miss Hayes, my name is Linda Garrison. I'm the director of the National Coalition for Housing and Economic Mobility. We're a nonprofit that works with Congress on legislation related to homelessness prevention and job training programs. I watched the segment about your work last night, and I have to say your approach addresses so many gaps we've been trying to fill at the policy level. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. The National Coalition was major, the kind of organization that influenced actual federal policy, that worked with senators and representatives to draft bills that could change systems nationwide. I'm flying into your city next month, Linda continued. Any chance you'd have time to meet? I'd love to discuss how your program could serve as a model for a pilot initiative we're proposing. There's potential federal funding involved, and your outcomes data is exactly what we need to make the case. Federal funding, pilot initiative, model program. The words seemed too big for my small kitchen, too significant for someone who couldn't even earn a spot at her own family's dinner table. I'm actually going to be in New York on Monday, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, for Good Morning America. Even better, Linda said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I'm based in D.C., but I can meet you in New York on Tuesday if you're still there, or we can connect the following week. This is exactly the kind of boots-on-the-ground innovation we need to highlight. The timing couldn't be more perfect. We're presenting to a Senate subcommittee in about 8 months, and having a working model with proven outcomes will be crucial. We scheduled the meeting before hanging up. I sat staring at my phone for several minutes after the call ended, trying to process how dramatically things were shifting. Less than 12 hours ago, I was eating pizza alone in my childhood bedroom. Now I was scheduling meetings with national policy directors about influencing federal legislation. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Vanessa. Mom says you left kind of early last night. Everything okay? I almost laughed. They hadn't noticed I was gone for hours during her party, but now Mom had apparently mentioned my early departure as if it were unusual. Everything's fine, I typed back, just tired. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay, thanks for coming to celebrate with me. The message sat there on my screen, innocent and oblivious. Thanks for coming to celebrate with me. As if I'd been included. As if I'd sat at that table with everyone else instead of being banished to the kitchen and eventually retreating to my old room. I didn't respond. The rest of Saturday disappeared in a blur of return calls and emails. I talked to reporters, scheduled follow-up meetings, coordinated with Margaret about handling the donation influx, and had a long conversation with the Good Morning America producer about talking points for Monday's segment. She mentioned they were working on expanding my segment time and wanted to include some additional footage they'd be filming at the shelter on Sunday. By evening, I'd accepted 4 speaking engagements, 3 consulting opportunities, and 1 advisory board position for a national nonprofit. Sunday was quieter but still surreal. I spent most of the day preparing for the interview, practicing, articulating the program's philosophy and outcomes without sounding rehearsed. Margaret came over in the afternoon to help me choose what to wear and to run through potential questions. You know this is going to change everything, right? She said as we sat on my couch reviewing statistics. Once you're on national TV, there's no going back to the quiet work. People will recognize you. Organizations will have expectations. You'll become the face of this movement. Is that bad? I asked. No, Margaret said thoughtfully. But it's different. You've been able to work in relative anonymity, to fail and adjust without public scrutiny. After Monday, everything you do will be visible. Just be prepared for that shift. She was right. Of course, I'd been operating under the radar, able to experiment and make mistakes without anyone watching. National exposure meant accountability, expectations, and pressure I'd never experienced before. But it also meant resources, funding, reach, the ability to help not just 50 women, but potentially thousands. The trade-off seemed worth it. Sunday evening, my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. Mom. Hi, honey, she said when I answered. I was thinking about Thanksgiving next month. Can you pick up the rolls from that bakery you like, the one on 5th Street? Small talk, normal family logistics, as if Friday night hadn't happened, as if nothing had changed. Sure, I said, I can do that. Wonderful. Oh, and Vanessa wants to know if you can help her move some furniture next weekend. She's redecorating her home office now that she got the promotion. Of course she was. Vanessa was redecorating to celebrate her success, and I was expected to help move furniture. The casual assumption of my availability, of my willingness to drop everything for family needs, while my own life went unacknowledged, suddenly felt more grating than usual. I'm actually going to be in New York next week, I said carefully. For work? Oh, Mom's tone carried mild surprise. Did you find a new job? That's wonderful, honey. She thought I was interviewing. Of course she did. The idea that I might be traveling for any other reason apparently didn't compute. Something like that, I said, unwilling to explain further. Let her assume what she wanted. Tuesday afternoon would clarify everything anyway, when the segment aired and my face appeared on national television in her living room while she watched her morning shows. Monday arrived cold and gray. My flight left at 6:00 a.m., which meant a 4:30 wake-up call and a rushed Uber to the airport. I spent the entire flight reviewing notes and trying to calm the anxiety building in my chest. This was real. This was happening. In a few hours, I'd be sitting in a studio in Manhattan, talking to millions of people about work that had been invisible to almost everyone for over a year. The Good Morning America studio was smaller than I expected, but more intimidating. Bright lights, multiple cameras, producers with headsets rushing around. The distinctive set I'd seen on TV 1,000 times now, surrounding me in 3 dimensions. Deborah Chen met me in the green room and walked me through the segment structure. We're framing this as an inspirational story about grassroots innovation, she explained. The anchor will ask about how you started, what makes your approach different, and the impact you've seen. We'll show clips from the local news segment and some footage we shot at the shelter yesterday. Just be yourself, be passionate, and don't worry about sounding polished. Authenticity plays better than perfection. They did my makeup and mic'd me up. Someone brought me water. A production assistant counted down the minutes until we went live. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then I was walking onto the set, shaking hands with the anchor, Jessica Morrison, whose face was as famous as any movie star's, and sitting in the chair across from her as cameras moved into position. And we're live in 3, 2, 1. Jessica smiled warmly at the camera. Coming up next, you're going to meet a woman whose innovative job training program for homeless women is changing lives and catching national attention. Lisa Hayes started with nothing but an idea and a basement office, and now her program has a placement rate that puts most traditional job services to shame. Stay with us. Commercial break. Jessica turned to me during the pause. Just relax and tell your story. You're going to do great. Then we were back, and I was talking. And somehow the words flowed naturally despite the terror. I explained how I'd started volunteering, how I'd noticed the gap between skills and opportunities, how we built the program piece by piece. Jessica asked intelligent questions that let me expand on the philosophy behind the work, treating women as capable rather than broken, focusing on their strengths rather than their deficits, creating sustainable pathways instead of temporary fixes. They played the clips from Channel 7. Jennifer appeared on screen, talking about getting her job. Patricia discussed the confidence the program had given her. Maria showed off her office. The results speak for themselves, Jessica said, turning back to me. 52 placements in 18 months with a 92% retention rate. Those are extraordinary numbers. The women did the work, I said. We just gave them the tools and got out of their way. That's what most people need. Not someone to save them, but someone to clear the obstacles and let them save themselves. The segment lasted the full 15 minutes. Afterward, as they removed my microphone, Jessica shook my hand again. That was excellent. Really powerful work you're doing. I have a feeling your phone is about to explode even more than it already has. She wasn't wrong. By the time I got back to my hotel room, my phone had basically become unusable from the volume of incoming messages. The shelter's website had crashed from traffic. Margaret texted that donations had now topped $65,000. My email inbox had over 300 new messages. And finally, there were messages from my family. Vanessa, Lisa, you were on Good Morning America. Why didn't you tell us? Cameron, dude, national TV. That's insane. Mom, honey, we just saw you on television. Why didn't you mention this? We had no idea. Call me. Dad, very impressive segment. We should talk. I stared at the messages, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. They'd had months to ask what I was doing with my time. Years to show interest in my life beyond whether I'd found a real job yet. A week ago, I'd literally been excluded from dinner because my presence wasn't considered relevant to their celebration of success. But now, after national television validated my work, suddenly they wanted to talk. Suddenly they were impressed. Suddenly I existed to them again. I didn't call Mom back. I didn't respond to any of the family messages. Instead, I met with Linda Garrison the following week after returning home. She brought another colleague from the coalition, and we spent 3 hours discussing how the shelter program could be scaled, what modifications would be needed for different cities, and what data we'd need to collect to satisfy federal oversight requirements. We want to propose a pilot program in 5 cities, Linda explained. We'd need you to serve as the primary consultant, helping establish programs based on your model. The Senate subcommittee meets in about 8 months. If we can show them a solid framework with proven outcomes, which you've already demonstrated, we have a real shot at securing initial funding. Then, implementation would take another year minimum. Consultant, framework, proven outcomes, 5 cities. The scope made my head spin. I'm in, I said, whatever you need. The next few weeks brought wave after wave of attention and opportunities. The Good Morning America segment had been shared thousands of times on social media. News outlets in other cities were calling to discuss similar programs in their areas. A documentary filmmaker wanted to follow the shelter for 6 months. 2 different literary agents emailed about book deals. My phone rang as I was collecting my luggage at baggage claim. Mom again. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message while waiting for my Uber. Lisa, honey, please call me back. We're all so proud of you, and we want to celebrate properly. Vanessa thinks we should have a family dinner on Friday, a real celebration, not like last week. We had no idea you were doing something so important. Please call me back so we can plan this. A real celebration, not like last week. The words landed with all the weight of their unintentional cruelty. They wanted to celebrate me now, after external validation had forced them to acknowledge my worth. They wanted to claim pride in accomplishments they'd never bothered to ask about. They wanted a dinner in my honor, after literally not saving me a seat when they celebrated Vanessa. I deleted the voicemail. Thursday brought another wave of opportunities and obligations. I met with Margaret and the shelter board to discuss how to handle the sudden influx of resources and attention. We hired 2 administrative assistants just to manage the communication volume. A local university offered us partnership office space for expansion at a drastically reduced rate. 3 major corporations reached out about partnership opportunities. That evening, Vanessa showed up at my apartment unannounced. Okay, what's going on? She asked when I opened the door. Mom's freaking out because you won't return her calls. We want to celebrate with you, Lisa. Why are you avoiding us? I let her inside but didn't offer her a seat. When's the family dinner supposed to be? I asked. Friday night. Mom's making your favorite pot roast. We're all going to be there. Cameron's even leaving work early. It'll be really special. Will there be a chair for me this time? Vanessa blinked. What? A chair, I repeated. Will there be an actual seat at the table, or will I be eating in the kitchen again? Her expression shifted through confusion to understanding to defensive discomfort. That was just... we didn't plan that. The table was full because Uncle Richard brought his kids, and we only had 12 chairs. I interrupted. For a family dinner, and you didn't include me in the count. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Vanessa. Nobody saved me a seat. Nobody even noticed I wasn't there. When I asked where to sit, you told me to eat in the kitchen because it was just a celebration of success and a family thing. Like I wasn't family. Like I wasn't worth including. Vanessa's face flushed. You're being dramatic. We didn't mean... I sat in my old bedroom eating pizza alone while you all celebrated your promotion downstairs, I continued, my voice level but firm. And at that exact moment, I was on the local news being called a community hero. By the time I came back downstairs, hours later, not one person had noticed I was gone. Lisa, now you want to have a dinner to celebrate me because I was on Good Morning America, because strangers validated that my work matters. But none of you asked about it before. None of you cared what I was doing with my life until it came with national recognition. Do you understand how that feels? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. We just didn't know it was such a big deal. You never said... I shouldn't have had to say anything. You should have asked. In 18 months of me working 70-hour weeks at the shelter, did anyone in our family ever ask me what I was actually doing there? Did anyone ask about my day, my work, what mattered to me? Silence stretched between us. Vanessa looked at her hands. That's what I thought, I said quietly. So no, I won't be coming to Friday dinner. You can tell Mom thanks for the offer, but I'm not interested in being celebrated now that I'm suddenly impressive enough to deserve a chair at the table. That's not fair, Vanessa protested weakly. We love you. We're family. Love requires attention, I said. It requires noticing when someone's missing. It requires caring about their life, even when it doesn't look like your version of success. Vanessa left shortly after, clearly upset but unable to argue effectively against points that were fundamentally true. I felt exhausted after she left, drained by the confrontation but also lighter somehow. I'd said what needed to be said. Friday evening, while my family presumably gathered for their makeup celebration dinner, I was at the shelter with Margaret and the women in our program, eating pizza and talking about next steps for expansion. Patricia brought her kids. Jennifer showed pictures of her new apartment. Maria announced she'd gotten her first promotion at work. These women, who'd been strangers 2 years ago, felt more like family than the people I'd grown up with. They saw me. They appreciated the work without needing national television to tell them it mattered. They'd been celebrating my efforts all along in quiet ways, through their own successes, their gratitude, and their willingness to keep showing up even when things got hard. My phone buzzed during dinner, a text from Mom. We're all here waiting for you. Please come. We're sorry about last week. We want to make it right." I didn't respond. There was nothing to make right. The damage had been done. The priorities had been revealed. They could have 100 dinners in my honor, and it wouldn't change the fundamental truth. They hadn't valued my work until other people told them to. The following weeks were controlled chaos. I flew to D.C. twice to meet with congressional staffers. The pilot program proposal moved forward faster than anyone expected. I hired a small team to help manage the expanding program. We secured office space in 3 new cities and began training local coordinators on our model. Media requests continued pouring in. I did interviews with NPR, PBS, and several major newspapers. A profile in Time magazine called me the reluctant face of innovative social services. The documentary filmmaker started shooting footage at the shelter. Through it all, my family kept trying. Texts, calls, even handwritten letters from Mom expressing how proud they were and how sorry they were for not understanding before. Vanessa sent flowers. Dad offered to help with financial planning for the expansion. Cameron invited me to have coffee and catch up properly. I responded politely but distantly, thanked them for their support, declined most invitations, kept them at arm's length in a way I'd never done before. Because here's the truth I'd learned sitting alone in that bedroom eating pizza while my face appeared on the news. Some people will only value you when others tell them you're valuable. Some people will only include you when excluding you becomes embarrassing. Some people will only celebrate your success when it reflects well on them. My family loved me. I didn't doubt that, but they'd loved me conditionally, with attention and pride that required external validation to activate. They'd needed strangers to tell them I was worth paying attention to. They'd needed national television to convince them I deserved a seat at the table. And I'd learned I didn't need their table anymore. I'd built my own, filled with people who'd valued me all along, who'd celebrated my small victories before anyone was watching. Women who understood what it meant to be overlooked and dismissed, who fought for their worth every single day without television cameras or magazine profiles or federal grants to validate their struggles. Nearly 2 years after that dinner, where no one saved me a seat, the pilot program launched in 5 cities simultaneously. The Senate subcommittee approved funding for a 3-year test period with an option to expand nationwide if outcomes met projections. Linda Garrison called me personally to share the news, and I sat in my new office, no longer a basement space, but a proper suite with windows and a conference room, trying to process what we'd accomplished. The documentary premiered on a major streaming platform. The book deal came through, with publication scheduled for the following spring. Universities invited me to speak not just to social work departments, but to business schools and policy programs. My small idea, born from wanting to help and needing something to fill my unemployed days, had grown into something with legitimate potential to influence how America approached homelessness and job training at a systemic level. My family attended the premiere screening of the documentary. I saw them in the audience during the Q&A session after, Mom crying, Dad looking genuinely moved, Vanessa and Cameron attentive in a way they'd never been before. They came up afterward, proud and emotional, wanting to congratulate me. "Thank you for coming," I said, hugging each of them briefly. "It means a lot that you're here." And I meant it. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the anger and the loneliness of that Friday night, I was glad they could witness what I'd built. I wanted them to understand what they'd almost missed by being too caught up in their own definitions of success to recognize mine. But when Vanessa invited me to Thanksgiving dinner at her newly redecorated house, I hesitated. "Will there be a seat for me?" I asked. She looked stricken. "Of course, Lisa, I promise." "I'll think about it," I said gently. "I need to check my schedule." Because forgiveness is one thing, trust is another, and I'd learned that my presence at their table was a gift, not an obligation. They'd have to earn it back, one dinner at a time, by proving they valued me, whether or not cameras were watching, whether or not strangers thought I was impressive, whether or not my success reflected well on them. I'd found my own definition of family in a basement office at a homeless shelter surrounded by women society had overlooked and dismissed. We'd built something together that mattered, that changed lives, that forced systems to pay attention, and we'd done it without anyone saving us a seat. We built our own table, pulled up our own chairs, and invited others to join us based on what they contributed, not what they could brag about at cocktail parties. That, I'd learned, was the real celebration of success. Not the fancy dinners, or the corporate promotions, or the magazine profiles, but the quiet revolution of people deciding they were worth showing up for, even when nobody else thought they mattered. Especially when nobody else thought they mattered. I never did make it to Thanksgiving at Vanessa's house. I spent it at the shelter instead, serving meals with Patricia and Jennifer and Maria and 50 other women whose names I knew, whose stories I'd heard, whose victories I'd celebrated long before anyone told me they were worth celebrating. We didn't have the good china or the extended table leaves or the fancy centerpiece. We had paper plates and folding chairs and decorations made by residents' kids, but every single person had a seat. And that, more than anything else, felt like something worth being thankful for.